So I'm excited for the audience to be able to understand much more than they ever did before about DFC. So why don't you take it away?
Great.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for the invitation to participate. For those of you who I see my name and maybe just some information about myself was put in the chat, but for those of you who don't know me, my name is Rashanda Johnson, and I am on the business development team in the Office of Health and Agribusiness at DFC, and I've been with the agency since 2016. And so day to day, I'm speaking to investors like yourselves who are interested in doing business in emerging markets or are currently doing business in emerging markets. And DFC, for those of you who are unfamiliar, is the U.S. government's development finance institution. And so each developed country has one of these. As the U.S. government's development finance institution, our mission is to facilitate private sector investment in emerging markets. And in doing so, advance U.S. foreign policy as well as address critical development challenges in the countries that we invest in. And we do this by partnering with the private sector. So we offer the private sector a suite of financial tools to help them mitigate the risk of doing business in emerging markets, which is our area of focus. And those tools are financing, political risk insurance. We also have a technical assistance and funds for feasibility studies that we offer investors. And we also invest in funds. And in terms of the areas where we work, I know I touched on that just a little bit, but our we are mandated to support investments in low-income and middle-income countries. And currently, we manage a portfolio worth about $40 billion, and it's spread across a variety of regions, but the focus in each of those regions is low-income and low-middle-income countries. The first tool that we offer investors is financing, and we can provide direct loans as well as loan guarantees up to $1 billion to investors with tenures ranging from typically it's 5 years up to 25 years. And we lend based on the total project cost. And our debt leverage is generally, I see someone's comments there, $40 billion. Yeah, that's the portfolio that we manage right now. And I think that number is actually going to be updated here soon once we have the FY24 results. But back to our financial tool. So we can provide debt leverage up to 75% of the total project cost. For example, if you have a project and your total project cost is $50 million, you could come to DFC and say that you need funding for your working capital, for CapEx costs, and we would consider lending up to 75% of that $50 million that you need to raise. And when we think about how much we're actually going to, provide, that's a question that actually comes up, well, what determines the 50 to 75%? Well, it's a couple of things. For those entities that have a limited track record, our debt leverage is going to be more conservative. And it also depends on the sector. We tend to have higher debt leverage for sectors like energy, where they have offtake agreements. We also you'll see, this in like critical infrastructure projects. but we will evaluate the projects as a whole, looking at the perceived risk of the project, as well as how much the balance sheet of the company can hold, and determine what that leverage will look like. The other product that we have is our political risk insurance product. So for those investors who are concerned with protecting their assets abroad, we have political risk insurance that can protect your assets from losses due to events like political violence, currency inconvertibility, or expropriation. And again, that coverage can be provided up to $1 billion. And we offer that coverage at market rates. And this tool is something that is often used by investors to help them raise capital as well. So if you can, present to a potential investor that you have political risk insurance, that may ease their concerns about investing in the project and help you and raise capital. The other product that we have is our equity, which is a fairly new product for us. We probably have just had the ability to do equity for the last 3 to 4 years when we transitioned from OPIC to DFC. And our strategy for equity is really geared to those companies that are in the growth stage. So we're looking at making, B, C, B investments, or when they're in the B, C, or D series is what I'm referring to. That's typically where DFC likes to come in. We're not like a Series A or even a pre-seed investor, but these are companies that are operating, generating revenue, and they're in this growth stage. We also are targeting those investors who are looking for larger amounts of equity. And so at minimum, we're starting at transactions seeking 20 million in equity from DFC. And our equity, we're limited to making a 30% to taking a 30% stake in the project. And so that would mean that the actual transaction size, or the amount that you're looking to raise, is somewhere around $60-90 million. And then we would consider making up to a 30% stake in the project. The other tool is technical assistance. So this is also a new tool for DFC, but we have technical assistance available to projects that are already existing. And we typically see this funding used when investors need support, maybe making their project more impactful to meet our guidelines on the development impact side. So there may be like training that they want to add, or we also see this, and I also see it being used in situations for investments that don't exist yet, but they need feasibility. They need assistance for a feasibility study or a market research study, or even in situations where they may need like an environmental impact assessment. So we could offer our funds for that. Or there may be some other advisory services that an existing project may need in order to meet DFC standards on the impact side, helping it become more commercially viable, or meaning like our environmental or social standards. So those are all our products. In terms of DFC's priorities, we are really focused on doing health and agribusiness projects. We're focused on energy, and uh, small business and financial services. In the area of health, there's three subsectors that we're focused on. There's health services and infrastructure, there's manufacturing and supply chain, and then also digital health. So you'll see things in our portfolio like hospitals and clinics, or you'll see us supporting manufacturers of diagnostics and therapeutics, or vaccine manufacturing projects, as well as pharmaceutical manufacturing projects. Another example that I can provide is a company that we supported called Africa Healthcare Network. And some of you may be familiar with that company, but Africa Healthcare Network approached DFC to help them expand their chain of dialysis centers in East Africa. And we provided them a loan to go from having 12 facilities to, I believe, 20 or 25 facilities. So these are the sorts of things that we're looking at. Also, on the digital health side, we're looking at telehealth platforms, we're looking at insurance products, and we're looking to do more in the digital health. I think out of all of the three subsectors within health, we probably see less in that area. In terms of agribusiness, our focus is on improving access to quality, affordable food. And so we're really focused on supporting investments that help get the food from the farmer to the market, as well as just making sure that the farmers are able to increase their yields. Also that, we're helping them be more resilient, especially with climate being an issue. So also in this sector, we're looking at insurance as a way to help smallholder farmers be more resilient and adapt to climate changes. And we're also looking at inputs. So we're helping farmers get access to fertilizer or seed. We also are very keen to support like processing facilities and cold storage facilities, and then logistics, as I touched on earlier, just helping get food from the farmer to the market. And then for infrastructure and energy, I'm going to group those together, but we really, again, this is somewhere where we really want to just improve the infrastructure of the countries that we are investing in. And that may look like us supporting development of roads, also bridges, ports, as well as helping increase availability of internet. So we're doing a lot on the infrastructure side to like make sure that people have access to the internet, making sure that people have access to reliable, affordable energy resources. And we're doing a lot in the renewable energy space. So a lot of solar farms you'll see in our portfolio, as well as wind farms and hydro facilities. But renewable energy is something that we're very much still investing in and is a priority for us. And then you'll see us doing other things in that space too, like supporting EV technology. And I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going to skip here. I think I'm coming down to time, but a question that's often asked is, how can I be eligible for DFC financing? What does that look like? And so when we're thinking about how we're going to prioritize our resources, we're looking at companies that can demonstrate a successful track record in the business line that they're seeking support for. And generally, we're looking for a track record of 2 to 3 years of operations and revenue generation. In addition to that, we want to see that the investor has some skin in the game. So we're not doing 100% financing. We're lending, as I mentioned earlier, between 50 and 75% of the total project cost. And we want to see the remainder of that invested by the sponsors of the project in the form of equity. In addition to that, we have to make sure that the investment aligns with our strategy. So whatever our strategy is for health or agribusiness, it has to align with that. And it also has to align with U.S. foreign policy. So when we're doing our evaluations, we're looking at it from a commercial perspective as well as from a policy perspective. And I mentioned this earlier that, we have some standards when it comes to the environment, when it comes to social and human rights. We also have standards for these projects when it comes to like development and what the economic impact of these projects will be. And so we're going to assess all of that and then determine how well the project is aligned with our priorities as well as our underwriting guidelines, and make a decision on whether or not to move the project forward. But generally, if it's a commercially viable project, it aligns with U.S. foreign policy. It aligns with our strategy, which of course you would have to speak to an investment officer to learn more about, well, what exactly is your strategy? And so we encourage investors before they submit an application, a formal application online, that they speak to someone like myself, someone on the business development team, or if they have a contact that is an investment officer, to reach out to them and share their idea. And then they can give you some feedback before you go through the, sorry, I thought I got disconnected there for a second. But yeah, they would be able to give you some feedback before you actually submitted a formal application. And then in addition to that, we're just going to make sure that it's not something that we're prohibited from supporting. So for example, we can't support any projects that are going to cause displacement of people. We can't support any projects that are going to have a negative impact on the US government. And you see this often when, they're exporting, say it's an agriculture project and they're exporting food back to the States, or also in the area of textiles. You see this because there's such a huge lobby around textiles. It's been very difficult for us to do those sorts of projects. But the best way to get started is to reach out to a DFC officer and speak to them about your project. And usually they're going to ask you for at least some sort of summary, if not a complete business plan and financials for the project to start that conversation. And I'll stop there and pause for questions.
Okay, that is awesome in every aspect. Let's see, I can't take that call now because I'm about to ask a question. So, Rashanda, thank you so much. That was amazingly efficient, comprehensive, and rather clear, all across the board. So, question number one from me, what is generally the loan review and processing time? And I know that that's probably contingent upon one, two, or three things, but can you tell us what that looks like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So generally, from the time that you submit a formal application through DFC's website, it's going to be a minimum of 6 to 9 months to reach commitment. And so during that process prior to you submitting an application, that I think is where it gets a little hairy, during that time, and even during diligence, there's going to be some back and forth. But usually because we advise you to reach out to an officer before submitting a formal application, there's some back and forth involved depending on the quality of the materials that we see or that we receive and the amount of information we receive. So at the time of application, we're looking for a complete business plan. We're looking for historical financial statements, and we're looking for a financial model. And ideally, prior to even submitting those things formally, you've spoken to an officer and they've given you feedback on each of those things, and then they invited you to submit a formal application. Going back to your original question, it's a minimum of 6 to 9 months in order to reach commitment from DFC.
And is there an engaging process outside of what you just described? In other words, if it's a full scale, this doesn't fit, is that a shorter period of time? Like a rejection comes in a month, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days.
Yeah, so the standard that we have generally within the agency, at least I could say this is true for our team. One, it's to be responsive. It's not going to be a situation where you submit something to us and you don't hear from us one way or the other. The standard is that we at least let you know that this doesn't work for us. And most of the time there's going to be some additional information to let you know, hey, once you reach these milestones, come back and speak to us. But
Okay.
yes, it is an iterative process, right? So if you send something to me today and, overall, it's interesting. It's in one of our priority sectors. And on the commercial side, I can see where it's commercially viable, or at least that there's potential for it to be commercially viable. I'm not just going to cut you off and that's going to be the end of the conversation. We can go back and forth until we get to a point where, I don't see a path forward, or to a point where you're actually ready to submit an application to DFC.
Yeah, so I think Melvin's got a question. Thomas, maybe your first question, what are your protocols for investors to approach DFC? I think has been answered, right? But the second question, if a stakeholder is rejected, where do they get help to become qualified? In other words, yeah.
Yeah, so the first question on how to engage DFC, Keith has my contact information. You could reach out to me and I can speak with you about your project. And that's really the first step there. You want to speak to an officer about your project. If it's a situation where you speak to an officer about your project and it's determined that you're not ready for DFC based on the stage that your project is at right now, we don't have an advisory team within our agency that would be able to guide you on putting together your business plan or your financial model. But we could at least give you tips from the DFC perspective on what it is that we would need to see based on our underwriting criteria. So let's just say it's a completely greenfield operation, meaning that it does not have a track record of operations and revenue generation. The project is not profitable and there's not a clear path to profitability yet. That's something that it's not going to be a strong fit for DFC. And we would be able to tell you that, we would like to see more of a track record, or if it's a situation where you don't have enough equity to meet our standards, we would be able to share that with you. But beyond that, we don't do any advising or even referring you to consultants that could help you. But we would be able to tell you from a perspective of how well the project meets our policy guidelines and what our strategy is, and then how well it meets our underwriting guidelines. And then, hopefully that sets you in the right direction.
Melvin.
Rashanda, thanks for your time. And just wanted to ask a quick question about alternatives. You mentioned telehealth.
Yes.
Can you just briefly go through what a telehealth project looks like?
Yeah, so there's yeah. So the most common telehealth project that I see are platforms where you're helping clients, let's just say in a rural area, get access to health services or information via a platform that they can access on their mobile phone or some other way, but it's a digital platform. So these would be usually they will allow the customer or a patient to be able to access a doctor in real time or schedule with a doctor, and maybe they're getting texts on they can put in information about certain symptoms they have, and they're able to get some feedback on, well, what medicines they need or what that could be, but just suggestions to help them out in the situation. But it's just something that these projects are connecting patients with providers to get them access to quality healthcare, because, maybe their nearest hospital is how many miles away, and it's just not easy for them. So that's the idea of these platforms that we primarily support. The other area in digital health, so outside of just like a telehealth platform, just digital health in general, we see these platforms that connect manufacturers to pharmacies as well as clinics to help them get the medical supplies that they need, or so that could be like medical equipment or actual pharmaceuticals. Because just a recent project that I'm thinking about is there's a huge problem with apparently counterfeit drugs in the market in different countries. And so we've looked at opportunities to help pharmacists as well as providers and clinics and hospitals have access to manufacturing facilities so they can avoid buying counterfeit drugs and things on the market. So when I'm thinking about digital health, it's these sorts of like mobile apps that help connect providers to patients, and also connecting providers to suppliers of whether it's pharmaceuticals or equipment.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to contact you. I have a good friend. He has a patent telemedicine solution, and they're concentrating on Medicare and Medicaid, and they're on like their fourth contract. So it sounds like a good match.
Mm-hmm.
And so definitely keep in contact with you to see how it can be deployed. Or does he have to come to you with a solution, or he comes to you and says, we have a platform, where are there opportunities? How does that work?
So opportunities in terms, so if he has a platform, and he's already identified, who his customers are going to be, what his business model, like how is this going to generate income? And now he's got all these other things in place, right? Or at least he has some sort of plan for this, right? And now
he's about close to 10 million right now.
Okay. And so he may be at a point where, okay, well, I need some long-term financing or medium to long-term financing at rates that are going to allow me to still run a viable business,
Got it.
then he would come to us.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, any more questions for Rashanda? This has been good. Of course, we look forward to getting back with you. I apologize over the last 2 days because I was going to get you, and I still will before I close out, the cancer moonshot information from the White
Okay,
House.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
that'll be a good session. And Melvin, estimated time of when our videos will be ready.
Monday on the US side and probably Wednesday altogether.
All right. So, Rashanda, I'm going to be in Atlanta at our MedWeek annual conference and MBDA and NMSDC. Are you coming?
You know, I know that was something that our Office of External Affairs was working on. I'll circle back with them and see um, if we will have a representative there. And hopefully that will be me, or at least I'll be one of them. But I
I hope
haven't
it is
heard.
as well, because we're gonna have a podcast program at the booth, and we'd like for you to be on it. And outreach is so critically important, but also we really have a great community between Africa and the U.S. here that we are literally inviting them to be a part of a cohort of our 10-week online training. And that's something else. You did mention training. You want to expound upon that? I mean, um, what kinds of training you funded before?
Yeah, so these would be and just to go back to because that falls under our technical assistance. And so
Uh-huh.
our technical assistance is used to help prepare projects to be eligible for DFC financing or equity or one of our other products. So it's not just like standalone financing or funds. Um, for training, but this would have to be attached to a larger project that is interested in DFC financing and would potentially be eligible for financing or one of the other products that we offer. But it's really used to just prepare the project to then be ready for financing, equity,
Or
political
maybe
risk,
or maybe a series of projects. Right.
possibly. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I did not underserve you all by having Rashanda be our final panelist for the 2-day IAEOZ Summit 2024 Africa. I think it's the way to put the icing on the cake and the candle that we can light and celebrate that we are at this point in time, where we say thank you so much, Rashanda. You will be hearing from this community. We'll be looking forward to working with you and your shop closely and excitingly achieving some success, because that's what this is all about, making projects happen. And the summit videos will be very instrumental to your office as you review them and circulate them around. But there's one project that we call a prize project. If there is nothing else, no questions in the chat, no hands raised, I am going to bid you adieu and say that this has been amazing. It's been an amazing beginning. And Rashanda, certainly want DFC to partner with us as we journey and make having made some real commitments to one another over these last 2 days to make Africa our home of opportunity for small, emerging, and minority-owned businesses. And we now know that made in Africa and African Americans who come back home to Africa, their home, is an equation that we'll all work towards making success happen for us all. This is wonderful. Thank you so much for showing up.
Thank you. And I look forward to staying in touch.
Absolutely.